Hey, welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I really hope you enjoy this video. You haven't had this class about the buyer's process, and it looks like a year since we did it last time. And I know that things are a little different in the market, but the idea of having a process, a system that I work with buyers is even more necessary as we get into what people consider to be a more challenging market, right? So what we do is by having systems, by having processes that we work through, those systems and processes help to navigate through those potential obstacles that we have to deal with, right? And as we get into this market that is ever evolving, right, and really changing itself into a more normal, natural service, professional market, having systems and processes are going to make things a lot easier, right? For those of you guys that when we did the training on the 6 phases of mastery, right? It was to get to stabilization. It's having systems, checklists, right? Things that we do so that we don't miss steps, right? And so that's the same thing as having a process here with buyers, just like having a process with sellers where every buyer, I do the exact same things, like a checklist. Here's the things that I do with this buyer, regardless of this buyer is a first-time buyer, a repeat buyer, an investor. Like, these are the steps, the processes that we have to take so that things don't fall through the cracks, so that I provide the level of service that's required of me in order to create the relationships with buyers who become my database, my past clients, my center of influence, right? They increase all that stuff. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is build a business that is creating referrals, correct? That's what everybody wants, right? So we want to make sure that we have some kind of a system in place that we follow, letter A to letter Z, to make sure we do the right things when we're supposed to, okay? Anybody have any questions before we get started? All right, then I will jump on here and I will share my screen. Let me try this here. All right. There we go. All right. So you guys should be seeing Buyer Process Workshop there on your screens, and we'll jump right in. So when we're talking about finding buyers, obviously the first and most important thing that we have to do in order to find those buyers is what? We have to prospect to get the buyer, right? So remember that, especially in this market, the things that have changed is we've got to step up our activity a little bit more, right? As we know that interest rates have increased and maybe it affects the amount of buyers that are in the pool and inventory starts to go up slightly, right? We still know that there is competition. There's competition for those good buyers, for the buyers that have money, that have credit, that, again, going back to that definition of buyers that we've talked about in the past, they're ready, willing, and able buyers, right? They're ready to take action today. They're willing to work the correct way, and they're able. They have the money, they have the credit, they're able to purchase a house, right? So we've got to do a little bit more prospecting to find, if you don't want to call it prospecting, we can call it lead generation. We have to do more activity to make sure that we're getting ourselves in front of those qualified buyers, the buyers that we want to work with. And we should be way more discerning of the buyers that we choose to work with than we are sometimes in our business. And I know that our business dictates sometimes the decisions that we make, right? So sometimes because we're not as productive as we want to be, or we're not seeing the results that we expect to see or want to see, that we choose to work sometimes with buyers who probably are not always the best, right? Of those 3 things that they have to be ready, willing, and able. Sometimes we're only working with the people who are ready and willing, but aren't able 100%, right? Or we're working with the people who are able, but they're maybe not willing to do the things that are necessary, or they're not quite ready yet, and we're forcing them to be ready. We're putting them into action and taking them and showing them properties and doing things before it's time to do it, right? Because we're in a hurry, because we're not getting the results that we want. So these are the things that we're doing. Okay, so we know we've got to prospect. We got to have conversations. Oops, what happened? It just disappeared. There we go. So we've got to do the things to generate the lead, to have the buyers, to even have a process. Make sense? All right, let's move on. So the first thing that we're going to do, so once we've done that, we've done the lead generation, we've gone through the lead follow-up, and we've got ourselves a good buyer, the first thing we're going to do is we got to set an appointment. We have to set an appointment with those buyers, and the first appointment that we're going to set with those buyers is with the lender to qualify them. It's always got to be the first step. When I meet a buyer, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have them sit down with the lender. Now, I have to do a little pre-qualifying myself, obviously, before I just direct them to my lender, because I think that sometimes, and this thing keeps shutting off. Sorry, guys. The things that we do, sometimes we just find a buyer who says yes, right? Not the ready and willing buyers, but just somebody says, yeah, of course I want to buy a house. And we stop at that yes, right? So we meet somebody while we're door knocking, we meet somebody in an open house, we meet somebody at the grocery store, whatever it is, we're cold calling. We meet somebody that says, yes, I want to buy a house. And we stop there. We don't ask any more questions. We don't ask, how long they've been working, how much income do they make, what do they think their credit looks like. We don't ask any of those questions, and we just send them off to our lender and say, here, make an appointment. And then when our lender doesn't get those people qualified or the appointment doesn't work out, we tend to start to blame the lender. We've got to sometimes look at the leads that we are referring to the lender, right? The process. And going back to that is, again, the more lead generation, the more prospecting, the more active I am, and the more leads that I generate and the more leads that I convert, those leads should be people who I believe to be qualified leads, and I have to do a little pre-qualifying. Just like you would with a seller. If you're going to listing appointments just because you talked to somebody and that person said, yeah, I'm thinking about selling, and you just run to their front door without doing any pre-qualification, right? Without knowing why or where they're going to go, knowing what their motivation is, knowing if they have any equity. Without knowing any of those things, is that going to be a successful listing appointment? No. Chances are that if I just run to a door of somebody who says, I want to sell my house, and I don't do any of that pre-qualifying, I don't find out if they're interviewing more agents, I don't find out what their qualifications are or their motivation is, that's probably going to be an unsuccessful listing presentation. But all day long, we will do that with buyers. We will send that buyer who we don't pre-qualify, who we don't ask those qualifying questions to, we will send that buyer to our lender and expect our lenders to make magic. Or sometimes we don't even do that first point of sending them to the lender, and we just make appointments to start showing because we just assume that people are going to qualify. And I know that not everybody does that. I know that not everybody that's watching this video or that's on this class right now is going to be guilty of that. But we've all done it at some point because we've been in a position where we wanted to get something, to make something happen, because we're not as productive, we're not as successful as we think we should be or could be, right? So remember, the system is, yes, I'm going to set that first appointment for the lender, but that first appointment for the lender is going to be for somebody who I've already done a little pre-qualifying on. I know that has some income. I know that they're ready to take action. I know that they're willing to do the things that are necessary. And I feel like their belief in their credit and the amount of income they have at least puts us on the path to be able to purchase. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So that's first, right? The first thing is that I'm going to have them meet with the lender, get qualified. Once they're qualified, I'm going to set up a buyer consultation appointment with them. So once I know, hey, this is what their buying power is, now we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about the entire process of purchasing a home. And where I'm going to start in that consultation is to find their why, what their motivation is, right? And we've talked about this in other classes and other meetings and, conversations I've had with agents, is that, again, for us as an agent is sometimes we stop a little bit short, right? Buyers will tell us why they want to buy when we ask that first question. Well, what is it that you're interested in? Why do you want to buy? What do you want to buy? And they will tell us about features, right? Bedroom, bathrooms, I need to have a pool, I need to have this, I need to have a big kitchen, I need a family room, I need all these things. And the reason I'm doing this is because I've always wanted to be a homeowner, right? And we kind of stop there. We kind of just stop there because it makes sense, right? Everybody wants to own a home, of course. But if we don't know what their true motivation is, their why, then it's much harder for us to direct them, to hold the buyer accountable to the things that they say they want. And that's part of our job when we're working with buyers, is some accountability to those buyers. And for those of you guys that have been in this business for any amount of time, you know that buyers have a tendency to get cold feet. even those ready, willing, and able buyers, the ones who seem super motivated, they start to get cold feet. And sometimes those cold feet manifest much earlier in the process than they do with others, right? Because I'm sure you guys have all worked with a buyer at some point that seems super motivated, is ready to go on appointments. You show them a house that looks exactly like the features that they wanted, and it feels like it matches the benefits, and we'll get to that in a moment, and they still refuse to write an offer. They still want to see more homes. They still want to keep looking. They still want to extend the process, right? That's cold feet. That's people who are just afraid to jump into action. And when we know their true motivation, when we're dealing with buyers like that, it gets a lot easier for us to have some level of influence on whether or not they take action or not. And that's what we're looking for, is understanding their why, their true why, not just because they said they want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but why they want it and what the true meaning of that is and what the benefit is to them. Because buyers don't buy by features, they buy by benefits. And the proof of that, the proof of the buying benefits over features is those of you guys that have worked with any amount of buyers have had buyers that tell you, I have to have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I have to be in this school district. I have to be in this city. I have to have this kitchen. And then you show and show and write and show and write and show and write, and they don't get anything accepted, and then they stop working with you because it's become your fault that they can't find the home that they want. And then they work with another agent, and guess what happens? They write an offer on something completely different than what they told you they had to have. And the reason that happens is because that property, even though it didn't match the features they were so definite on, it matched the benefit that those features provided to that buyer, so that buyer acted on benefit. And so for us, when we go back to the consultation, and I jumped ahead a little bit, is when we're looking at that why in the consultation, it's to dig in, to get past the features and to really get to what the benefit that those features provide. And once we find out that benefit to those buyers, then that's the benefit that we remind them of every time we show them a property. So this is really key in the consultation, is that conversation is to continue to ask why over and over again. So when you ask the buyer, well, why is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath important to you? And they give you that first answer. Tell me more about that. What will it look like when you get the 3-bedroom, 2-bath? How is that going to feel? What will be the effect on your family? We keep asking that question why over and over again, just in different formulations. We get to the true benefit of what really is motivating them. And once we know that truth, once we've gotten down to that little nugget of, hey, the reason why is because comfort, right? This will provide the comfort for my family that we need. Then when we can identify properties that match that comfort level, even if maybe it doesn't match the features that they associated with that comfort level, you can usually get buyers to take action. And the benefits that buyers are always going to look for is comfort, security, and status, right? So comfort would be space, like we have room to do the things we need to do, whether that be a large backyard or a large family room or good-sized bedrooms or a big living room, whatever it is. Comfort, right? That property provides comfort. And you can start to see that in the features that a buyer is trying to sell you on. You can start to kind of ascertain the benefit of comfort from those features. Another one is security. Again, there's certain things like security. Hey, you can't see in, the windows are covered, the backyard is private. Those are the kind of things when people start talking about, you're going to start to feel like, oh, the benefit they're looking for from property is security. And status, well, come on, that's pretty straightforward. I want to have a really beautiful front yard and, the curb appeal to be amazing. And I want it to be in this really high-end area because I've always wanted to live there and my family looks up to that, right? You start to have those conversations and you find out that status is the thing that's really driving them. And when you know those things by asking why over and over again, then you can use that as you start to search for properties and directing them to take action. Does that make sense? Questions about that so far? Okay. Now, what we want to do is make sure that the wants that they have, right, when we start having that conversation about the features and benefits, does it match their buying power, right? Because if I qualify with a lender and I qualify to, $650,000, but my wants, the features and benefits that I'm asking you for are, I want to live in Friendly Hills and I want to have, 4 or 5 bedrooms and I want these things. I know that's a crazy stretch, but what we have to look at is, does it make sense? If I qualify for 650, but I'm looking for properties, or the wants and the benefits that I want in those properties are for properties that would be 800, 900,000, $1 million. Do my wants and my power match? No. So the conversation then has to make sure that we're looking at and directing them in a way that everything matches, that the features and benefits that they're looking for match their abilities, right? Remember the ready, willing, and able. Okay? So we have to have, that's part of the conversation. And part of that conversation, before we get to the communication, and part of that conversation is also making sure there's some urgency created in the buyer, right? That they understand that even though inventory levels are up and there's fewer buyers, that we have to take some action based on the availability of the properties that exist. So wants and buying power. The preferred method of communication and how often you're going to communicate. I think that's one of the things that we just assume how people want to communicate. So every year, and I've talked about this in the past, you guys have heard it's like a broken record. NAR and CAR, right? National Association of Realtors, California Association of Realtors, they do a survey. They do a survey of buyers and sellers from the previous year, and one of the questions they ask is, what is your preferred method of communication? And then the next question they ask is, and how did your agent communicate with you? And a lot of times, their preferred method of communication and the way they were communicated with the agent don't match. So it's a step that we miss. We assume everybody wants to communicate the way we do. So, right, somebody might be my preference might be phone calls, but my client's preference might be text messages. I may have a preference of text messages. My client may have a preference of email. Now, I'm not saying that you won't use all levels of communication, right? If I talk to my client, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what is your preferred method of communication? And they say, well, it's telephone. That means that always the main source of our communication is going to be by phone. Doesn't mean it won't be followed up by text or an email, or that some original communication might not be generated by text and email and followed up with a phone call. It just means I need to know what their preferred method is, which means the things that are super important, stuff that I have to talk to them about or is important to talk to them about, maybe telephone calls as opposed to text messages and emails. And when I say how often I'm going to communicate, is that's your business plan, is how often, as I deal with a buyer and we're going through this process and setting appointments and getting ready for showings, how often are we going to be in communication? And what happens is by setting that expectation of this is how we're going to communicate and how often we're going to communicate, what happens is that now I've created that habit with them, and as long as I stay within that promise of communication, our relationship is always going to be good because the communication is going to be good. I want to, from the beginning in this consultation, explain the entire buying process. Explain the whole thing. Hey, you keep shutting off. Explain the whole thing. I want to explain to them everything that's going to happen, from the first showing, how we're going to set showing appointments, what the process is of writing an offer, how long it takes to get usually offers presented and offers accepted, what happens after an offer gets accepted, what the time periods are. I'm going to explain everything from A to Z, the whole thing, the whole 25, 45-day process, 6-month process if you're talking about buyers from beginning to end, whatever it is. I'm going to step by step explain the entire process of buying a home so that they know this is what's going to happen. I'm going to show you, we're going to set an appointment. Like today, the first step is today when this appointment is over, if you choose to work with me, we're going to set an appointment for our first showing. And then every time we show properties, my expectation is you're going to write an offer. If you don't write offers, we don't find properties that work, then at the end of that showing appointment, we will set another appointment for showing. My job for them is to always have some appointment on the book with that buyer so that they know that there is a connection, right? They know when I'm going to communicate. We know when we have an appointment. All that stuff is going to be set. We're going to have another appointment. When we find a property, we're going to write an offer. Once we write an offer, we're going to submit the offer. Once we submit the offer, we're going to get the answer in this many days, generally. Once we get our offer accepted, then this is the next step, and these are the time periods. I'm going to explain it just like that, step by step. Now, do I expect them to remember that when we get into escrow? No, I do not. I don't expect them to remember all of that. Now, I know there's some agents that have some things that they've set up for their clients where they have the timelines kind of in a chart or graph where they send it to the, as part of their consultation. They send it to their buyer and say, hey, here's again a visual representation of the things we talked about. You could do that too. But what it does do is it kind of plants that seed for that, so that when we get into escrow and we get into the process of showing, I can always refer back to, hey, remember our first meeting when I said X was going to happen? That's where we're at right now, right? It's always just to kind of plant that seed so that when I'm having conversations with them, it is not the first time they're hearing it. Because remember, I talked about earlier is that buyers are going to get cold feet. Even the best buyers are going to get it. And some of them get it really early. And the more I explain the process to them and have them prepared going into the process, the less likely those cold feet are to appear, because I can always go back to that. I can fall back to that original meeting where we explain the process. Okay? I am going to set expectations. Right? That's what we talked about, and I just said it a minute ago, was I expect you to write an offer every time we go look at property. That's my expectation. And it doesn't matter that this market is changing and that there's fewer buyers and that the inventory seems to be improving. The properties that are desirable, priced right, and in the great areas, they're going to move faster than everything else no matter what. Again, remember, our days on market times are still in the 20s. That is exceedingly fast in comparison to a normal market. So we've got to get prepared that those time on market days are still going to grow eventually as this market progresses. It's going to change. But the things that are priced right, that are desirable areas, that are the homes that people want, those homes are still selling extremely quickly. And so I still have to have an expectation of my buyer that I'm only going to show you properties that match the features and benefits that we spoke about. And I expect that you're going to write an offer on that property right away. I expect that that's what you're going to do. The first showing, I expect you to write an offer on one, if not all of the properties that we look at, because that's where we're still there on the good ones. And again, setting that expectation is part of the ready, willing, and able, because if you have a buyer that's okay with that after this meeting that says, yeah, I expect that too, then we're on the right page, right? We're on the same page, and we're heading in the right direction as far as working together and finding these properties for them. Okay? Set expectations. And sometimes what you have to do is show them that their belief, because my assumption, and you guys could probably share this with me better, is when buyers hear the news that inventory is going up and that there's fewer buyers out there, are there buyers that believe that there are a lot of choices as far as homes go? Yes. Is it true that there are a lot of well-priced, good location, good homes? Is there a lot? No, there is not. So the inventory may be growing, or it may have grown, but some of that is, let's be honest, is garbage. Is still some of those speculative sellers that feel like they want to get in at the last hurrah and get properties that are overpriced and get them out on the market. So you've got to create the expectation with them that there is still limited inventory. Create some urgency in them. One of the great ways to do that I've always found is in these appointments is have a property that matches their criteria, because you've done a little bit of, pre-qualifying with them. Have a property that matches their criteria, that was priced properly in a nice neighborhood, that's sold very quickly and is already sold, and show them that. Show them that property after you get here for set activity. Okay, so this property would match, based on the conversation we've had, this property right here would match the criteria, the features and benefits that you would be willing to write an offer on. And they're going to say yes, and when you show it to them, say, yeah, great, that one sold in 10 days. So I want you to understand what we're dealing with out there. So when we find a house that looks like this one, that meets your criteria, then we've got to jump on it immediately, right? Kind of kind of show them that there is a lack of these dream homes that exist. And that's another thing in the expectations, is making sure that they're aware that this is reality, not fantasy land, as Mike Ferry likes to say. This is not. We may not find your dream home, but my job is to find you 70% of your dream home. And you've got to be prepared when we find 70% of your dream home to take action and write an offer on that. Okay? So you've got to, again, set expectations. Sometimes with us as buyer's agents is we try to paint a very rosy picture, as we want to make sure they feel good with us, right? Like, I feel good. Like, our opportunities are abundant. And I'm not saying that they aren't, but we've also got to get them into a realistic place so they are ready to take action. Because if we just sell them on this abundance of I'm going to find you your dream home, and we're going to find that perfect home for you. We are going to find the perfect home for you, but it may not be your dream home, but it's going to be the perfect one for you. It's just having the expectations are realistic for them, and that makes it a lot easier. You get less of the, cold feet and the hemming and hawing and the refusal to write offers. Okay. Like I said earlier, I'm going to set that first showing appointment. At the end of our appointment, if they choose to work with me, the last thing that we're going to do is set an appointment to go look at properties. Okay? And that's how I'm going to complete that consultation. Next up, prior to showing, I'm going to start looking based on the criteria, right? The benefits that I feel. Features too, but benefits, right? I'm going to start looking for that stuff. I'm going to search for it prior to our appointment, right? Because I already have an appointment with my buyer because I set it. What I want to do is, maybe there's a little bit more leeway now because of the amount of inventory there is. But generally, again, the great properties that are priced properly, that are going to be super desirable, those properties are going to sell fast. So if I have an appointment for this Saturday, I might not want to start looking yet for the properties that I'm going to show on Saturday, because there's a chance that they're going to have offers already, things like that. But I could do it. It's a little less, than 18 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. It's a little easier now to do some more looking now to set appointments. But if I'm going to do that, I got to be proactive with the listing agent and let that listing agent know, hey, by the way, I'm planning on showing your property this weekend, right? And we'll get to the communication parts, but I got to do that immediately. Okay, so I want to show them I want to look for the properties as close to my showing as possible to make sure that they're still going to be active when it's time for me to show. Now, if there is nothing that matches, if I can't find something that matches the benefit, right? Because we know that sometimes it's difficult to find the features. We know that the specific 3-bedroom, 2-bath, big open kitchen, all that stuff may be difficult to find. But remember, we found out about their benefits. So I'm going to look at the benefits of things too. And maybe there might be a 2-bedroom, 1-bath that fits. The benefit that maybe I want to show. But if I don't find something that really fits in that features and benefits, I don't want to force a showing. I don't want to show just to show. Because if I do that, I'm creating a bad relationship with my buyer, because I'm showing them things that I know that they're not going to want to buy. And if I am pushing them to write an offer on those things, I'm having them write offers on stuff that doesn't even match what we talked about. So I've got to be true to that conversation that we ultimately had with that consultation. So if there isn't anything, I've got to be honest and pick up the phone and call my buyer and say, hey, listen, buyer, I went through, right now there is just nothing that is really going to match your wants and needs, right? The features and benefits that you told me were important to you. There's nothing that matches that. And instead of wasting your time and mine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend time looking for a property of my own that matches that. And as soon as something comes up, I will get in touch with you for us to reschedule an appointment. But for now, let's put another appointment on the books for X date, right? That's how I want to finish it. I know it sounds like, I don't want to keep pushing off a buyer because somebody else is going to take them. But if there's nothing for you to show them, there's nothing for somebody else to show them. And don't provide bad service just to have some service. Be honest with them. Honesty is going to get a lot farther. Okay? So you got to be honest. If there's nothing to show, don't just show to show. Because you have more valuable things to do with your time, and so do they. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, before I'm going to show it, I'm going to call the listing agent. I'm going to call the listing agent saying, hey, listen, I'm ready to show your property tomorrow. I want to find out, is the property still available? Do you have any offers? When are you going to be presenting your offers? And then I'm going to let them know when I'm showing it exactly. Right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, okay, here's the deal. Mr. Agent, I'm showing your property tomorrow. Is the property still active? Do you have any offers? What is your best offer? Now, I know that 99% of the time the listing agent is not going to share with you what their best offer is. I understand that. Doesn't mean you can't ask. And I know that the common response from the listing agent is, that's classified, right? That's information I can't share with you. That's privileged, right? They're going to give you all kinds of information. It's not true. There's no such thing as confidentiality of the offer unless the listing agent and the seller have a signed confidentiality agreement they can't share. So they could share. I understand that they're not probably going to share. What I would like to share with you guys as my agents and the people that are watching this video is start to take into consideration as listing agent, there is a benefit to you and your seller if you're willing to share what the best offer is, even if it's your own. Because remember, offers are not confidential. And my job as listing agent is to get the best possible deal I can for my seller, whether that be my buyer or somebody else's. And so if I share offers, right, if I share what the best offer is, there's two things that happen. Number one is I give the opportunity to procure a better offer for my seller. Number two is I can eliminate offers that aren't going to be competitive, that I don't now have to present non-competitive offers. So it does clear up my plate. It reduces the amount of conversations I have to have with my seller over offers because I'm required to present every offer, whether it's bad or good. So what it does is maybe it discourages somebody. If I say to, Matthew, here's the best offer I have. Is at $750, no concessions, close in 21 days. And his buyer can only go to $730. And his buyer needs a credit for closing costs, right? Maybe he writes the offer still because his buyers push him to, but the chances are when he goes back to his buyers and says, listen, they already have an offer at $750. They don't need any closing costs. They're going to close in 21 days. We can only go to $730. We need some closing costs paid for, and we can't get it done in 21 days. Do you still want to write the offer? The buyers are probably going to say no. Maybe they say yes still and they still present it. But what it does is it stops me from having to present one more offer that I know we're not going to accept. Or he goes back to their buyers and they go back to the lender and they work out something and they figure it out and they say, yeah, we can match that offer. Maybe they did still present or submit their offer, and it gives me some competition. Now, even if it is my own offer, right? I have the highest offer and I tell the other offers, hey, this is the offer that I have, and I get an offer that beats mine. Because it's not confidential, I have the ability to go back to my buyer and still say to my buyer, hey, buyer, here's an offer I just got. Do you want to stay with yours? And I'll push yours and I'll still present yours. But do you want to try to improve your offer to match the best one that we have? I can do that. So that's just a food for thought for listing agents. Let's get back to buyers. So I'm going to ask that question. If I don't want to ask it as what your best offer is, maybe I ask the question of, hey, this is what I'm planning on offering. Right? If my buyer likes the property, we're thinking that we could be here, would I be wasting my time? Or maybe that's a conversation you have after you do the showing, and we'll get to that also. When they're presenting the offer, because I want to know, right? If I'm showing on Saturday and they're presenting on Sunday, then that means I got to say to my seller, my buyer, say, look, if you're showing on Saturday, we got to write the offer on Saturday. We don't have time to go home and sleep on it. Or if they're presenting a week from now, I need to know that because I can still go back to my buyers and say, listen, we still need to get the offer written. We need to get it in, but this is the things that we're going to do to extend the amount of time that our offer is good for, all of those things. So those are conversations that have to be had with the listing agent. After the showing, or at the showing, sell the house. Sell the house. See, don't just walk into the house with the buyers and go, here it is, go take a look. Look, I'm assuming that there is somebody that's either going to watch this video later that is on this class now that has not sold the property, that has just opened the door, walked them in and said, what do you guys think? I understand because it's not something that we push is the sales skills. We push how to get the lead, how to follow up on the lead, how to set the appointment, right? How to get the listing signed, how to get the buyers to work with you, but we don't go really past that part of what do you do when you go to a showing, right? So you got to sell the house. And when I mean sell the house, you got to talk to them about the features and the benefits. Now, the problem with that is that we don't preview houses anymore, or never really, in the market that we're coming out of, didn't have the ability to preview properties. It was like, it's on the market, we better go show it right now, and we're both going to see it for the first time. Right? Like, we're both going to see this house for the first time. So we don't know anything about it. So we're discovering things about the house at the same time. I mean, think about if you were going shopping for a car and the car salesman walked up to you at the lot and said, "Hey, can I help you?" And you said, "Yes, I'm very interested in, this Mercedes E-Class." And they said, "Okay, great. We have 3 of them. Let's go show you these Mercedes E-Classes." And you walk over to the car and he opens the door and the Mercedes does all that stuff on the dashboard and the display, and the salesperson went, "Oh, wow, I didn't know it did that." You'd be like, "What the hell are you selling me cars if you didn't know it did that?" When he turns the car on and, he puts it into drive and the door's locked by itself. "Hey, look at that. The door's locked by itself. Did you know it did that?" If the salesperson did that to you, you'd be like, I think I feel like getting out of the car. But we do it all the time with the house. We walk in and we go, I think hey, there's the kitchen over there. Hey, look at that. They got 2 stoves. They got 2 ovens in this kitchen. Did you know it had that? Oh, wow, that's cool. Do you understand? Like, the issue is that we should have some knowledge of where things are, what it looks like if we're going to try to sell it. Because if we're discovering it with them, it does kind of diminish our influence over them. Does that make sense? So, Jesus, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, you always, before I show the property, what I do, I tell them to wait for me to turn on the lights, make sure it's safe, and I go through the house really quick to get familiar with it because I know it's the first time I'm looking at the property as well. So when I'm there, when I open the door for them, the lights are on, and I'm a little familiar with the property 10 seconds prior they walk in at least.
Yeah. And perfect. That's a great point, because that's the next one is you got to get to the property first and stage the home. Now, stage, obviously, I don't mean stage like put furniture and set up. That's not what I mean. I mean, open the curtains, turn on the lights, walk through, open some doors to bedrooms, check some stuff out, look at what the layout is. And you could do that very quickly. Like, here's the thing. When we show houses, we either drive with the clients or we meet them at the property, right? So what happens is we get there, and we've all done it, is we're there with the buyers and we're trying to get the key out of the key box and they're hovering over us, right? They're like impending doom. They're just standing over our shoulder watching us fiddle with our key safe and try to get it out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You start sweating, you get nervous, you start fumbling with it, you do the wrong things. Look, that's not the way to get started, right? Because now I'm already flustered. Now I'm going to open the door and flustered. I'm walking in with them at the same time. What you do is, even if you drive them there or you meet them there, you tell them, "So do me a favor. Can you guys just stay right here by the car? Give me about 5 minutes. I'm going to get the property open, ready for you guys so you can see it. So just give me about 5 minutes. I'll come back and get you." You go to the key safe while they're standing by the car. You unlock it. You get your key out. You go in. You open up the curtains. You turn on the lights. You do a quick walkthrough. Make sure there's not somebody sleeping in one of the bedrooms, because that happened to me. Walk through. Get an idea of what the layout is. Then walk outside and get them and bring them in, and then remind them of all the features and benefits that we discussed in the consultation. Right? We start talking about it. Remember, you said you wanted to have a kitchen that was open? Come here. Look at this kitchen. Look at how it opens up into the family room. Look, you can see everything from here. You'll be part of the party while you're in the kitchen. Right? You wanted this big backyard. Well, look at this. French doors open to this giant backyard. And look at how it's set up. It's like perfect for what you wanted for entertaining. Remember that pool you talked about? Wait till you see this pool that they have. Right? You know what the features and benefits you've discussed with these buyers are. Now you go in and find out about the property and then remind them as you walk them through. Don't just let them go and discover for their own or discover with them. So get to the property, either just before them and have them meet you there, or even if they show up with you. "Hey guys, give me about 5 minutes. I want to go in there and get everything set up, make sure everything's okay, that there's nobody in there." And then go in, get everything staged and ready to go. Make sense? Right? So Jesus led us perfectly into that point. Now, If they like the property, I'm going to prompt them to write an offer, even if it's the first house. A lot of times what happens for us as agents is we have 3 or 4 homes that we want to show on this showing appointment, and we've somehow decided that we've put them from, worst to best, right? We've saved the best for last. It doesn't matter what we think is best or worst. All that matters is what the buyer is motivated. And if they say they love the house, don't talk them out of loving it. Don't try to tell them that something is going to be better. Don't encourage them to see all of the homes. Just say, hey, you guys love this one. It feels like the right one. Let's write the offer right now. Let's do it. And even if they say, well, don't we have other houses to look at? Yeah, but who cares? You guys love this one. Let's write the offer. Doesn't matter what the other ones are. You love this one. Let's write the offer. Now, they still may try to push and go see the other ones, and that's fine. You can't twist their arm and say, nope, not showing you. Forget it. We're not going to the other ones. You write an offer now or that's it. No, it's fine. But you still got to try to push. Prompt them to, hey, you know what? You don't want to make a mistake. We're going to forget about this one. We're going to go look at other ones. I just don't want you guys to miss out on an opportunity. Okay? Now, you could write offer on more than one house. I'm okay with that. You could do that too. Say, hey, listen, I know you love that one. I'll show you the other 2 that we have, but I still really think we should write an offer on this one. At least be prepared to submit an offer on this one so that we don't miss an opportunity. Just always tell them you don't want to miss the opportunity, okay? Because there is nothing more deflating to a buyer moving forward than not getting their offer accepted or, not even getting an opportunity at something that they really liked. It's happened so many times where a buyer wants to sleep on something and then they sleep on it. And then by the time they've made that decision on the sleep on it, it's not available to them any longer. So just remind them of that, okay? They don't want to miss an opportunity. Now, when we're writing and submitting the offer, prior to writing the offer, now I'm going to call the listing agent again. I know I already talked to them, right? I know I've already asked them some questions, but what I want to do is prior to writing the offer and spending the time writing the offer, because I know for some of us newer agents, it takes a while to write the offer. I don't want to spend time writing an offer if it doesn't make any sense. So I want to make sure that nothing has changed since I spoke to the listing agent before the showing, right? I want to make sure they didn't accept an offer. I want to see if they got any more offers, if the presentation date has changed, right? Because your offer is good for 3 days. It expires after 3 days. And if they're not going to present offers for another week, then technically my offer could be expired before they present. I want to make sure I remedy that in my writing of the offer. So speak to the agent. Let them know you're submitting it. Ask that question again. Hey, I need to ask you one more time. I'm going to submit this offer at X. Am I wasting my time? Right? Try to get that information from them, even though they probably won't present that to you or offer it up to you. Okay? So do that prior to always call. When I submit, make sure I have everything. Make sure my offer is complete. Remember, there is nothing that makes your offer less attractive than incomplete offers and things that are missing. So I got to make sure I have all my proof of funds. I got to make sure I have that pre-approval, pre-qual from the lender already ready to go. I have to make sure that I have a copy of the FICO scores, right? I always want to send that with the pre-qual. The agency disclosure, I don't have to send it, but it's fine. It already just comes with the offer. The PRBS, right? All the contract now with all the other stuff that it comes with, right? The wire fraud and the Fair Housing Appraisal Act addendum, all those things need to be included, right? And any other addenda or amendments that I have included in the purchase, make sure it is complete before I send it. Because you have to make sure that you are submitting the best offer possible for your client, right? Put your best foot forward for you and for that buyer. Now, we get the offer accepted. Congratulations. We submitted everything right. We wrote the offer well. We had everything we needed in there, and the seller chose our offer, right? So remember after acceptance that communication is going to be key. It's communication through the whole process, but now especially communication is really important. The communication I have with my client through this process now that we're in escrow, the communication with the listing agent as to what's happening, the communication with the lender to make sure that we're running everything on point, the communication with my transaction coordinator, right? All of this stuff is vital. If I don't have good communication, things get missed. So it's my responsibility, as I am the head of this now, right? This organization, I'm the head. I start here. I work for the buyer, the lender, and the title company, and the TC, and everybody else. I have to make sure I'm communicating with to make sure my team is working properly to do the best job we possibly can for the buyer. So please, 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 even if you over communicate, it's better to over communicate, right? Communication is important. Now, here in the office, you've got to fill out an open escrow sheet, right? So that you can give it to your transaction coordinator. And if you don't use the transaction coordinators, it's still, that open escrow sheet still needs to be turned into the listing coordinator here at the office, because she's the one who inputs all of the sales into our back office system. So if you're watching this video from another office, know what that process is with your office. And communicate with the buyer and remind them of the timelines that we discussed in the consultation, right? Remember, in the consultation, it was every step of the way, the whole process of purchasing a home. So I have to now remind them of those timelines, right? I'm going to call the lender, let them know I have an accepted offer so that they can get everything started, right? Because the lender has time periods that they have to follow also. So I want to be on it. As soon as I get that acceptance, I'm going to be on the phone with my lender. Hey, we got it accepted. Here's everything. I'm going to send them a copy of the contract, right? Make sure that the deposit is in escrow within the 3 business days, right? Or whatever you've negotiated in that contract. I got to make sure. So that's a conversation with my buyer. Hey, Mr. Buyer, you got to get to the bank. You got to wire those funds in. And I got to start scheduling inspections. Well, so that's another conversation. Again, a reminder with the buyer from the consultation. You're going to have to hire the home inspector. Here, remember the 3 inspectors that I gave you. Choose any one of those. Schedule that inspection and let me know what date you're scheduling it. The sooner the better, please. That's what's going to happen. That's the conversation. Now, the timelines, remember, the seller's got 7 days to provide to you all the disclosures and reports, including the agent's visual inspection disclosure, the AVID. It's part of the TDS. It's supposed to be delivered in the first 7 days, and that includes yours as buyer's agent, which means that inside that first 7 days, you need to schedule some time to go back to that property and go through and do your AVID, because that's the rules when that comes to that contract. So again, it's knowing all these steps, having a little checklist that you'll be able to follow so things don't get missed. The AVID is one of those disclosures that's got to be done in the first 7 days. Now, the seller has 7 days to continue to provide to you any of the city pre-sale reports, inspections, anything that they have from a prior sale, any inspections and reports that they already have, they've got to give to you. If the seller's not on time, right, if you get to day 7, you haven't gotten it, then the buyer needs to send a notice to seller to perform. Now, I know that agents are hesitant to use it. It doesn't mean that the deal's going to cancel or it has to cancel. Again, it's just proof that you're doing your job and following timelines as you should be. Now, for the buyer, they got 17 days. This is by default. Things get negotiated and changed, but by default, they have 17 days to review all of the disclosures and the reports that they received from the seller. They have 17 days to do that. They have 17 days to schedule and perform any inspections. That doesn't have to just be the professional home inspection. It could be anything they want to do. They can do a roof inspection. They can do an inspection of the foundation. They can do a soil inspection for the backyard. They could hire a surveyor to find out property lines. They can do whatever they want. Anything that they want to do, they can do it as long as it doesn't damage the property. They just have to pay for it, but they have to do it in the first 17 days. They also, in that 17 days, have to make sure that the appraisal is scheduled, performed, and the complete report is received within those 17 days. So that's why making sure the lender is aware of the acceptance date and all the timelines helps to make sure that gets taken care of, because in order for your lender to order an appraisal, they have to get that disclosure signed. That takes 3 days. So you've got to also be on the phone with your buyer saying to them, hey, the lender's going to send you paperwork. If they send you something that needs to be signed and returned, do it immediately. Do not wait, because that delays the process. Okay, so again, communication. Remove the inspection and appraisal contingency and remove the loan contingency. in those 17 days. That's how it works. Now, remember, with the loan contingency, again, this communication with your lender is important. The loan contingency doesn't say remove in 17 days if you have unconditional approval. It says remove in 17 days. So you've just got to get to a position with your buyer, and this is the discussion that happened in the consultation also and throughout this escrow period. You've got to get to a position where they understand that even though there are conditions on the approval, those conditions are normal, and it is okay for us to move forward and remove the contingency. Okay, again, communication. Now we're getting prepped to close. If everything went well, the last step before we close is the final walkthrough. Now, the final walkthrough is just to verify the condition of the property is the same as when you wrote the offer, and to make sure that any of the agreed upon repairs were completed, right? So if I bought the property and I didn't request any repairs and they didn't agree to do any repairs, all I'm doing is making sure when I do my walkthrough that the property is in the same condition it was when I wrote the offer. If we did agree on some repairs to be done, this is for me to go back and make sure those repairs were completed, and we should do this 5 days prior to close of escrow. We've talked about this in the past. The trigger point for that should be your lender calling you and saying, hey, we're ready to order loan docs. That should be for you to now schedule that walkthrough 5 days prior to close of escrow. The final walkthrough is not a contingency, which means if I go into that final walkthrough and things aren't completed or the property's not in the same condition, it doesn't necessarily mean I have the right to cancel without forfeiting my deposit. Okay? The reason we do it 5 days prior and the reason we do it prior to signing loan docs is because if there is an issue, we need to have time to be able to negotiate, to extend escrow, to complete the repairs prior to closing. That's why we need the time. But if we don't have time to do it, and those things need to be taken care of and they don't, we may have to close with the property in the condition it's in, and then after the fact deal with the seller as far as whatever legal and monetary consequences there would be for the seller for not completing the repairs or not providing the property in the same condition. Okay, but it's not a contingency. You don't automatically have the right to cancel, so you have to make sure that your buyer understands that. At closing, you're going to sign the docs. It's going to fund 24 to 48 hours after you sign those and return those docs. The next day, title records the grant deed, and then you're going to deliver the keys either on the close date, 3 days after, or whatever time period we negotiated in the RPA, including the SIP and the RLAS, which is the seller's license to remain in possession, and the residential lease after sale. Right, so that's it. Once you get to that point of signing loan docs, it moves very fast, and everything is going downhill. It's going to close fairly quickly, right? And that's why we need to make sure that we do the walkthrough prior to that. So as long as that all went to plan, you're going to close and get paid. Okay. So with that, let me stop sharing the video now. So with that, it's having a checklist. Now, I do have a checklist that goes along with this. And so if you send me an email, I will share the checklist with you. I think I've shared it with a lot of you already, but if you send me an email, I'll share with you the checklist. And remember, we've talked about this. As part of those phases of mastery, of success, is start working your business off of checklists, to-do lists, task lists, right? So I do have a task list for that buyer process. And all you do is just check the box. Did I do this step, right? So it'll help you with that. So any questions before I let you guys go? And remember, this video will be on YouTube later. It's going to replace an older one that's there. So I will put this newer one up and take that one down so you have a more updated conversation there. But anybody have any questions about anything before we move on?
I mean,
well, I'm glad that you don't have any questions. That means one of two things. Either you guys got this and you're going to run with it and you're going to have a system for working with your buyers and you're going to use the task list and the checklist, or you're utterly confused and you're going to be worse with buyers than you were before you started. And I hope it's the former, not the latter. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Again, if you want to watch this video later, it'll be on YouTube. And if you need anything, you know where to find me. Take care, everybody.